We're going to talk all about food and agriculture today. And the great thing about these videos is you can go at the pace that you need to go. So if I'm going too fast, you can pause, you can go back, you can stop, you can take a break, whatever you want to do. This will help you get those notes at your pace, at the pace that works best for you. So we're going to start today with food and agriculture. We've been talking about land use and land management. We've talked so far about urbanized areas. We talked about parks and forests. So today we're going to talk about how humans use land to grow food. Humans need food, of course. We need a variety of foods: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, vitamins, minerals. We need a good variety in order to stay healthy. If we don't get the things that we need, then we can suffer from malnutrition. Malnutrition occurs when we either don't get enough calories, which is our energy source, or when we don't get a good enough variety of food in order to fulfill our body's needs of proteins, lipids, vitamins, whatever it may be. When you have a large area that's not able to get enough food for a long time, then you get what's called a famine. A famine is a widespread shortage of food, widespread starvation. And that's not a good situation. We want to make sure that we don't have famines, that we are able to take care of people, and the best way to do that is to manage our land for food efficiently. Our diet may vary worldwide. Now, diet is the type and the amount of food that a person eats. Healthy diets have a good mix of nutrients, vitamins, minerals. Even though that diet may vary by region, we still need that mix. It just might be in a different proportion from location to location. Our developed nations, like the United States, Canada, Japan, tend to use more calories during the day, tend to ingest more calories, and have a larger proportion of proteins, which would be from an animal source, and fats, while your developing nations tend to have more plant-based diets with just smaller amounts of protein and fats. But no matter where you are, you still need all three in order to stay healthy. So when we talk about using the land to grow food, we talk about how efficiently we can grow food. Efficiency is the amount of food that we can produce in a certain area of land. Now, we only have so much water, we only have so many nutrients. Can we get a good amount of food production from that space, from that water, to fulfill all of our needs? Now, the best crops will produce a large amount of food with very little negative impact on the environment. And that's what our goal is. Most of our diets worldwide are plant-based. Even if you're in a developed nation that eats a lot of meat, you're still, for the most part, plant-based. You can get more energy. You can get from a meat source, but it also takes more energy to grow that meat. It takes more water, it takes more space. And the reason is because if you think back to when we talked about food pyramids and trophic levels, as you go from the producers, the plants, to the consumers, even the primary consumers, you lose about 10% of that energy going from one trophic level to the next. So our primary consumers, like cows and sheep, would produce 10% less energy than the plants that they're eating because they're using some of that energy in the course of living. So our goal is to find ways to increase our efficiency by studying plants and animals that give us a high yield. Now, yield is the amount of food that you can produce. So we want to produce the most amount of food in a given area, and we're also looking for foods that can thrive in lots of different areas and don't require large amounts of inputs like fertilizer, water, pesticides. The picture down there is seaweed, which a lot of people are looking at eating seaweed because it grows in a lot of different places with very minimal input and provides a lot of calorie and nutrition. Food and famine are usually linked to poverty. We are able to grow a lot of food worldwide. In fact, we can grow enough to feed our entire population at the moment. So if there's areas that aren't getting the food that they need, it's almost entirely the result of poverty, usually in Africa, Asia, South America. Now, as our poverty numbers decline, think about the video we watched right before Christmas where he was talking about how our couples are the ones that were buying the bicycle, and they're trying to move up in the world to make more money. Our number of people living in poverty has shrunk. So as a result, our food must also go up. We have to increase that yield of food, and increasing the yield of our crops with subsistence farmers. Now, subsistence farmers are the ones that just have their own little crop. They're not commercial farming. They're not giant plots of land with monoculture with one species that they're growing. They're growing on their plot of land. Increasing their yield will help both goals. It'll bring them out of poverty because they're able to grow enough food to share and sell, and it'll also increase the amount of food that's available in our communities. To do this, we have had a lot of success with something called the Green Revolution. Between 1950 and 1970, Mexico was able to increase their wheat production 8 times. And of course, India was able to double their production of rice. Now, this is without increasing the amount of land that they're using. They're increasing their yield. This is the result of a new variety of grain. While this is very easy to do in large commercial agriculture plots, sometimes it's not always helpful to the farmers that don't have the machinery needed. They don't have the access to the special seeds, the amounts of land that they need. So we're still working on ways to increase yield for our small subsistence farmers. Only about 10% of the land on Earth is arable. Arable means that it's able to grow crops. The rest of it is, like we mentioned, it's urbanized, it's not able to grow crops, it's too dry, too wet. So that land that we have must be used as efficiently as possible. Now, to use that, there's some things that we can do. We can plow. Plowing is breaking up the soil. You can uproot weeds, you can mix those nutrients in, bring those that phosphorus and nitrogen to the surface. You can use fertilization. Fertilization is putting nitrogen and phosphorus and those minerals that are needed into the ground, either by organic means like manure or plant waste like leftover leaves, or using synthetic chemicals. Irrigation is another process that's giving water to the plants, either by running the water through irrigation ditches, spraying it by sprinklers, or dripping it through hoses. And then finally, pest control is removing weeds or spraying insects, things that will harm the plants that we're trying to get by either crowding them out or eating them, destroying them. Fertile soil is necessary. We have to have good fertile soil, and this is one that we're having to really monitor and watch recently. Now, good fertile soil is composed of several things. You have living organisms like earthworms. You've got rock particles, of course, what we think of as dirt. You've got water, you've got air mixed in, and organic material like dead decaying leaves, dead decaying animals, bacteria, things that are all in the soil helping the next plant to grow. Problems arise when our soil erodes, when the rock in the soil, when our fertile soil is moved away. Without that topsoil, that fertile layer, we can't grow crops. And a lot of our current farming methods kind of hurt us in a way because they increase the rate of erosion. Plowing will break up the soil, which makes it easier to blow away or wash away. And irrigation puts water on the ground, which will run off and take the soil with it. So we've got to think of new farming practices and methods to keep our fertile soil in place. When we have too much erosion, or if we have overgrazing or other kinds of damage, when we have land damage, it's called degradation. To degrade something means to make it worse. So land degradation happens when our land is so damaged it can't support life anymore. It can't support that local ecology or the crop that we're trying to grow. When it gets so bad, we can get something called desertification. That's when our land becomes almost desert-like. And you can see from the picture over here, we've got barren soil, not very much topsoil, too dry, not very fertile, no organic material, not very good for growing crops. This map shows you an area, or shows you the areas that are most vulnerable to desertification by either people's practices or by the climate at that location. But there are some things that we can do. Okay, things that we can do. One is terracing. Terracing, if you've got fertile land that's on a slope, the erosion can take the water, the wind can erode that fertile soil and take it downhill. So terracing is almost like making little stair steps that stop the soil as it's flowing downhill. Contour plowing, similar feature. You plow the land along the land's contours so that you don't get as much erosion. You can also leave strips of vegetation, as they have done here, that kind of act either as windbreaks or water breaks to stop that erosion. They have drip irrigation here. You see the little hoses in between the plants that puts the water right at the roots of the plants instead of spraying it all over the place and losing some of that water to evaporation or to spraying places where it doesn't need to go. And then, of course, no-till farming over here. Tilling is like plowing. If you have no-till farming, then the last year's crop just stay there and you don't take it off. They protect the soil and leave it in place until the new plants can grow up, and they also protect the baby plants. And then as those plants decay, then they return those nutrients into the soil to feed the next crop. We can also add fertilizers. We can either add organic fertilizers like compost, which are partially decomposed organic material, waste, manure, last year's crop, plants added back, or we can add inorganic fertilizer. Inorganic fertilizers are chemicals that have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in them. Now, they kind of get a bad rep, those inorganic fertilizers, but without them, our world food production would be less than half of what it currently is. So without fertilizers, we wouldn't be able to feed the people that we have. And of course, we always have to watch, be careful of salinization. Salinization, think salt, S-A-L, salt. That's the accumulation of salts in the soil. And that can be a big problem in areas where you have little rainfall. The rain will fall, leach the salts out of the soil, and then when they evaporate, leave those salts behind. And that can turn our soil from being good and healthy into too salty to sustain the crops. So we're going to pause there because there's more to come. Go to video 2, take a break, stretch yourself, go back and take your vocabulary words if you need to, and then when you're ready, go to video 2 and we'll talk about the animal side.